Ankit, are we live?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining me today for the third edition of Insanely Awesome Chats. Really, an initiative dedicated to helping aspiring entrepreneurs. Given the current situation, I took on this initiative to really help aspiring entrepreneurs learn from established entrepreneurs, their stories and their sort of ups and downs, and really about how to build endurance and resilience during times like COVID. So, before we start, just a few house rules. The session will be recorded and will be available on my website, bhanuchopra.com. Please enter the questions in the Q&A box and not in the chat box. I will pick them up as we go along. And so now for our chat today, I'm very thrilled that we have Yashish Dahiya, who's agreed to join us, who's not only built a unicorn, but also a very successful digital business, but managed to pursue his passion in fitness. And I don't know if many of you know this, he's the fifth fastest Ironman finisher from India. I'm extremely fascinated, and Yashish, you'll have a bunch of fitness enthusiasts who should be part of our attendees today to learn more about this. Yashish is an alumni of IIT Delhi and IIM Ahemdabad, as well as NCR. He's the co-founder and CEO of PolicyBazaar. In over 12 years, he's grown PolicyBazaar to become a key influencer in consumer decisions around insurance. He's an avid sportsman, crazy about fitness, has worked in the past as MD of eBookers, and was also a consultant with Bain and Company in their London office. So welcome, Yashish. Thank you for joining us. And I
Thanks
really
for having me over here.
And I really want to start with actually talking about, this Ironman goal. How did you, you're building, you're part of the startup, you're building a great company, it's crazy hours, and then you manage to pursue this, fitness goal of being an Ironman finisher. And not only that, but be one of the fastest. So really, what inspired you to get into fitness, and how did you set up such a lofty goal as an Ironman?
So Banu, it's a long story if you will permit me. I will not take very long, but it actually started when I was about 8 years old. I was not good in hockey or football or anything. I had some spatial awareness issues, but I could beat my neighbor at long distance running, and he was about 2 years elder to me. So long distance running got to me because I was good at it, not initially because I enjoyed it. And I took part in my school, cross country in Meerut, and I came sixth in the entire school. And I was at that time 8 years old, and this was a senior school. So that became sort of my identity. So all the children in the school, I wasn't good in academics that time. So, all boys really want to be known by something, when we are small. And that became my identity, Yashish the runner. That stayed my identity throughout, whether it was school, college, etc. And I think when I was about 35, my children took to swimming in the way I took to running because they became swimmers. And I used to go to the swimming pool and I used to train with them because there was nothing else to do, right? Many parents will take their kids to the swimming pool and just let them be with the coaches. But I approached the coach and I said, "Sir, would you also mind training me?" And so he started training me. So I became a decent swimmer. Like I went to the world championships. I represented India. I became the Indian national champion for my age group and had pretty decent timings, right? I became a good swimmer. Then in Delhi, there was this competition happening, I think in February 2016, where, we all did the triathlon. And I was a 40-plus-year-old, right? I was 44 years old. And I just went for the lark, let's go. And I'll also participate. I bought a cycle from Decathlon and I went to participate. What happened shocked me because I not just came first, but I came first by 10 minutes on the hour. So like I finished in 1 hour, 9 minutes, and then the second person came in at 1 hour, 19. And the second person was looked fit. I did not look fit. I looked like fat at that time. So I've always been running since I was 8 years old. I was a decent swimmer. And I think it was sort of luck that all this came together. And I suddenly realized at the age of 44, oh my God, I could actually be good at this thing called the triathlon, because it's a combination of the three. And I seem to be good at all three. And then I didn't know how to participate in an Ironman. And actually, Saurabh from Fitso told me there's this thing happening in Kalmar and you can go and participate. And I didn't know anything. I went and participated. In fact, the first time I went there, I ran in just normal running shorts. And so, it wasn't like an Ironman dress or anything. I didn't even know what the dresses are. But I enjoyed it. I think I love that whole cycling, running, swimming thing. And I also felt it would make me better because, I've always had this thing since I was a kid, because I was a runner. The body's not fully developed. You've got very strong heart and, good core and good legs, but, your upper body is usually not as strong for runners. So I felt good, this would be a good balance of everything. And then, of course, it started becoming a discipline. So now, it is 20 hours a week. I have a lot of time because I get up early, Bhanu. And office, as we all know, usually starts around, 10 o'clock. You usually can't do business calls before 8 o'clock, even if you wanted to, right? Even with.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have a good, 3 to 5 hours in the morning available to myself. I think we all do if we wish to.
Yeah.
And I use that to train. And, now, of course, it's getting more and more, disciplined and rigorous. And both my children are also into triathlon. So we all enjoy it as a family now.
Wow. So Yashish, this triathlon that you did in 2016, are you saying there was like no training? You just showed up and you came first?
Absolutely. If I send you my picture, it was an embarrassment because I was so round. I was 96 kgs.
That's amazing.
And I was totally round. And, people still joke about it when they look at that picture. But you see, if you are a good swimmer, you already end up quite ahead of everybody. And if you are a good cyclist, you can do quite well in that as well. And so, and I've always been a good runner. I was a state level runner, so I've always been a decent runner, right? So, like I'll do a half marathon in about 1 hour 20 some minutes. So, I've been a good runner. So there are very few of those also. Who's going to finish the cycling and the swimming and then run also very well? You see, most people, either they're runners or they're swimmers or they're one of them. They're not both. Actually, running and swimming work against each other, by the way, because for swimming, you need very high ankle mobility. And for running, you actually need fairly stiff ankles. So I think, they both actually are quite counter to each other.
So listen, I'm going to get into a little bit more of this as we go along, but I want to sort of also relate to how you're sort of building PolicyBazaar. And, we read a lot about how you started the company, but I would love to hear for our audience today, something that you haven't discussed when you started out PolicyBazaar. There's enough information out there in media and public, but something that you haven't shared before when you started PolicyBazaar.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that's already there, but I think, before we started PolicyBazaar, I think this is also in the media. My family lived in the UK, and I don't think initially they were very keen to move to India. And I also was taking it more as an experiment. See, this whole thing that, I was committed and I was going to do it is a bit of a, I think, misunderstanding. I was seeing it as an experiment, one of the 3-4 things that you're going to try out, right? Okay, let's try this PolicyBazaar thing in India as well. I think it got funded prematurely. So in the sense, it was just an idea and it got funding and suddenly became real and it kind of sucked you in. And once you sucked you in it as afterthought, you thought about all these things, right? That health insurance market, life insurance market, and how important that market is. And it kept convincing you more and more. But I think, I would say when the journey began, there wasn't as much clarity. It was a very basic journey. It was just, some comparison stuff and all. Uh, I think what people may not know is that 3 months after Policy Bazaar was launched, I was still looking for jobs in the UK. So, it wasn't like a commitment. I think for about the first 3 to 4 months, and yes, I had invested some money. I had invested about, of personal money, I think I had invested about 16,000 pounds, which is about 16 lakh rupees, which at that time was a lot of money for me, right? Please understand, I had never done a business. I was always in a job. Um, but at the same time, it was an option. And I think that's, something that many entrepreneurs can take away, that it was still an option. Yes, I was not doing any other job at that time. I wouldn't do this while I was doing another job, but I was still looking for jobs. So it wasn't like I was decidedly becoming an entrepreneur.
So Yashish, starting a company, as I've done the same, and this is a gigantic task. The fact that you were in London and decide to move to India, it's even sort of more, you're taking a lot more on, given the fact that your network is really back in the UK. So, how did you go about solving? I mean, I'm still curious. What made you decide to come, to India and start Policy Bazaar versus doing something there? And then, capital is one issue. What about, finding co-founders? Because when I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, one of the things besides capital people struggle with is, I'm good at one thing. How do I go about finding co-founders? And I heard on your Josh Talks, I think it was, you talked about you had like 18 people when you started the company. How did you go about finding those sort of co-founders and people?
So let me put it very bluntly. Yes, I am seen as the face of Policy Bazaar. A lot of people give me credit for Policy Bazaar. But had the co-founders not been there, I would have never done it. In fact, they are the reasons I did it. It is very clear that they already were in India. They wanted to do Policy Bazaar. I was actually the least committed out of the 18. Honest to God, I was the least committed out of these 18. So
how did you find these people, Yashish?
Who are these people? They worked with me in the past. They worked with me at eBookers. They worked with me at First Europa. So a lot of them are common colleagues who enjoyed working with me. They of course enjoyed working with me. I also enjoyed working with them. We wanted to do something together. We had this idea that Policy Bazaar could be one of those things that we could work on. But honestly, it was the only idea we could work on together. Otherwise, I would go and do something in the UK and they would do something in India, right? But I think it's the team mentality, and I think that is what is very special about Policy Bazaar. And the more you hear about it, the more you would realize that it's eventually a team. And I honestly wasn't the most committed one. I was actually the least committed. In fact, these were 2008 days, and my parents were telling me every day that you take a flight and go back. What are you doing here? So I think your team carries you along, and I think that credit many a times doesn't exist. But more importantly, Bhanu, one of the things I notice when I look at companies, and this is something management and founders should both take into consideration. See, Policy Bazaar as a company, the management stock is higher than the founder stock. If you were to look at Alok and me as founders, right? So our management has more stock than we do. And I think that is very critical. I see startups where 95% of the stock belongs to one founder or two founders. Great. They must be great people. But are they the only people that are going to build the entire company? And then, the same people would go out and make big statements that we value our team. If you value your team, where is the equity? Right? So I think equity sharing is a very critical component of building any business. And while I wasn't a team player in sports, I do individual sports, but in work, thankfully, I'm a massive team player. So, and starting Policy Bazaar clearly was to my disadvantage because I had a job, I had a mortgage to pay. I didn't have money. As I told you, I just had that 18,000 pounds. My wife had to go out and find a job. because she wasn't working before that. Before that, I was the primary earning person. So we had a lot of financial difficulty. And here I was in India without a salary, without any prospect of a salary. And, the investors telling me that, okay, you know, you can take maybe 20 lakh rupees as salary for the first 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. I was on 20 lakh rupees salary. Please understand, my kids were going to private school in the UK. The annual cost for both of them 40 lakh rupees after tax. So I think that financial difficulty of 5 years, people misunderstand. Let me just give you the facts. The facts are there were times when I could not afford road tax for my car or insurance for my car. And those may seem like crazy things, but those were real back then. And I didn't have to make that decision because, if for myself, it was a disaster. But for the 17 other co-founders, if I had not done that, then PolicyBazaar would not have happened. And for them, PolicyBazaar was a dream. So can you go out on a limb for other people's dream? Then I think it's great. And if you can, you will get rewarded also, like I'm getting rewarded now.
Yeah. And Yashish, this is a great point, because I think that's what people see. People see the success, but they don't see the tolls, the hard work, the sleepless nights that as entrepreneurs you have to go through. So it sounds like, you went through some serious personal sacrifice in the earlier days. So what did you tell yourself every morning when you woke up? Because not only did you have to deal with sort of the financial difficulty personally, but also, you were trying to disrupt the space of insurance, and that was obviously going to take time, because you had to convince, the suppliers, the insurance companies. You had to find customers to get comfortable with selling them online. So what was the, the recipe or the secret sauce that you had every day to keep yourself motivated and keep going?
Yeah, that with me, fortunately, is a massive advantage since I was a kid. Uh, I work a lot, and I'm usually sitting there saying, I've got no work left. So even very small things like, sometimes when you make food at home or something, I get it all done in like 5 minutes very quickly. I wash all the dishes very quickly. So I do things very fast. And so most of the time, people around me will think I'm almost not working. So that's a massive advantage with me. So, we were able to focus. And of course, since you mentioned I had studied at the IIT and the IIM in India, most of my education is Indian. And very quickly, when we entered the Indian space, we realized most of the CEOs of the insurance companies were either friends or, people I had known. And so we got into the system very fast. And we were able to convince people. And eventually, we had lots of challenges with the regulator. But one thing I always kept in mind, we were doing the right thing. We were doing the right thing for the consumer. If you're doing the right thing every day in the morning, eventually, even if you fail, you don't feel bad. So, that keeps you going. And I remember one conversation with the regulator when one person in the regulator said, we could shut you down. And I said, sir, that is your job. My job is to do what I'm doing. So let me get on with my job. And you do what you have to do. And he said, what do you mean? I said, sir, you are like Arjun. You have the arrow in your hand and the bow. I'm like Karan. I'm doing my work. You can kill me. Please go ahead and fire. But that will be on your conscience, not on mine. Right? I will keep doing my work. So I think from that perspective, and a lot of my colleagues who were in that meeting still recollect that, he's talking to the regulator, he's talking about Karan Arjun and all that stuff. but I think the point is, when you're doing the right thing, that sincerity and the honesty comes through. And somewhere people find it in them to come along. And they are able to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I think we were able to convince most of the industry. Today, we work with 50 insurance companies. We work with 100 banking partners. All these partners have come along over a period of time. Nobody just, said on day one, okay, Yashish, we love to work with you. You're a great guy. No. You know, I can give you some examples. For example, Egon Religer, who became one of our largest partners, uh, I visited them about 30 times. Many times I would go there, they would not even meet. Right. Then one guy saw me in the hallway one day and he said, "You sit here very often. Why are you here?" And I said, "I do this and all." He says, "Oh, come in, come in." This guy was Harshal Shah, who's right now with Citibank in or something in Singapore. But he got us in and then we started. And then, you know, Egon did a lot of business with us. Same with HDFC. Today we do for HDFC combined as a group about almost 700 crores of premium between life and general. But it took me 20 meetings to get the first transaction going with HDFC. 20 times coming from Delhi to Bombay, you know. So I think initial is always hard here. It's never easy. And I remember all those conversations. I remember all those people. Many of them are not at HDFC any longer. So see, that's the other thing I realize, that if you stick it and if you're a long-term player, many times people will change. Like, you know, since I've been there, IIT has had 4 chairmen. It's the 4th chairman that we are dealing with right now, right? So people keep changing, but and views keep changing, and organizations keep changing. But if you're at it for a very, very long term, then, you know, suddenly you start to do something special with it.
Yeah. No, I am also a big believer of persistence and perseverance. So, you know, coming into this chat, I felt like you must have spent a lot of time building your endurance, but it sounds like you're just born with great genes. So for people like me and others, because I can tell you, Yashish, after I read up on you and I'm very inspired, and I bought a cycle and started cycling and my speed's gone up, which I feel very good about. So I want to ask you, for others like me and, you know, the audience out there, you know, can you talk a little bit about, you know, how you built endurance? Now it sounds like you're doing it more as a discipline. And then how do you use what you've learned in your training, in building endurance, you know, for
Yeah.
business as well?
No, sure. So I think the earlier part of my life is actually irrelevant for that, up to 2016 till I became 44, because I was always an endurance athlete, in the sense I was always a runner, I was always a swimmer. In fact, the reason I got into swimming was also the same. You know, I remember in IIT, there was 1500-meter competition happening, and we didn't have anybody who could swim 1500 meters. All the good swimmers could only swim 200, 300, 400. So they said, "वो दहिया को पकड़ के लाओ, वो long distance running करता है, वो ये भी करेगा." And I came there and I didn't even know how to swim properly that time, but I came first in that race only because of endurance. But I leave that part aside. And you're right, somewhere I was blessed with great endurance. But how did I develop it? There are two important things I have learned. One is break it down into shorter periods. So if you're doing a marathon, don't think about the marathon. Think about the next 2 kilometers only. Think about the next small amount of time only, and think about what you're going to do in that phase. Because we are stronger than we believe we are. We believe we will not be able to do it, but actually our bodies are capable of a lot more than we think they are capable of. And so when the 2 kilometers passes, and when you get to that point 2 kilometers later, suppose you're at kilometer 22, after kilometer 24, if you only think of the new kilometers, you'll be at 26, you'll be at 28, you'll be at 30. My point is, if you just think about the next 2 kilometers and worry about how you're going to get over the next 2 kilometers and convince your mind there is nothing beyond those 2 kilometers, then that really helps you. That's the mind game one has learned. Second is, from a training perspective, I started interval training back in 2016, and that is a discipline I brought in. And the discipline and the training part was, intervals really help you, because instead of doing a 10-kilometer run straight, if I broke it into 8 1-kilometer runs with some breaks in the middle, or even 6 1-kilometer runs, my 10-kilometer time will improve very fast, very quickly. And the reason is your body gets used to the higher speed. And because of the multiple repetitions, your endurance is building. You just don't know it's building up. So very high bursts of effort, which you know you can't sustain, but which you do repeatedly, build a huge amount of endurance capability. I think the third aspect is nutrition. You have to have the right nutrition, because at some stage your body, runs on carbs and sugars and all that stuff, and eventually it just doesn't have anything, right? And if your mind can only handle, like, it's like, yeah, I've got a great mind, but if your car doesn't have fuel, then it will stop, right? It just will stop, like, or you'll die or something, right? So I think nutrition is a great piece. And the fourth, uh, which has become again a part of the habit, is further strength training and conditioning and flexibility training. That all helps. Many a times as sports people, we believe you just turn up on the field, do your main activity, but you almost need to have a similar amount of time. So suppose you want to run, you could be doing anything, running, cycling, whatever, but suppose you want to run for 1 hour. Well, you've got to have at least 1 hour, 40 minutes, 20 minutes for the warm up, 20 minutes for the cool down, something for stretching, something for core exercise, some strength exercise. You need to balance it out. You can't spend all your time on the activity. You can probably spend half your time on the activity and half the time on the other stuff. Sorry, I'm going through it very fast. And the last would be rest. Rest is important, because if your body doesn't have rest, and all these concepts, Banu, I did not know in 2016, but now I know them. And so while my timings are improving, I feel far more comfortable doing the races now. That time it was, suddenly hit me like boom. I wasn't comfortable during the race. I was having to put in effort, but now I can do it effortlessly. I think that's the difference.
So Yashish, I can almost draw parallels to, all the ingredients that you talked about could be used in building a business. But I'm keen to hear from you, how much of that have you applied to building PolicyBazaar?
I applied all the time. I applied all the time. So it's the same thing in PolicyBazaar. If you talk to anybody in PolicyBazaar, they will say this guy cheats us, because in fact, my daughter, they make this caricature, and she was only 4 years old when she wrote this. She wrote deceiving, that he's a deceiving person. And so do my office people say. And what they say is he builds mirages. He only talks about the next 2 years, as if at the end of 2 years, we're going to get some major victory. And after 2 years, it's like the next 2 years. It's like the next 2 years. It's like the next 2 years, but it's always a 2-year plan. And because I think it takes about 2 years in business to deliver anything meaningful. Even if you're doing a small part of strategy or something, like, if you want to develop a app experience, it takes you 2 years to deliver it. You can't do it in 2 days or 2 months. The customer feedback, the whole loop will take time, getting the industry together, etc. So we work in 2-year cycles, and we build very aggressive strategies for every 2 years. Even if you talk to our suppliers, they will say PolicyBazaar is a different company every 2 years, because every 2 years, the language we are speaking is different. So, we were a marketing advertising company. Today, we are a data company. And it's not because we want to impress investors. It is because we genuinely are, right? So I think that is one. And the second part is I like to work in very short bursts of very high effort. So, I may have, again, and repeatedly so, without thinking. So you can't last that way forever. You can probably last half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, 1 day, but you will have a break and you'll start again. And then, you balance it, like work gets balanced with exercise, which is a
effort during the day, or are you talking
it can be anything. It can be anything, Manu. It can be a day, it can be a month, it can be a week, it can be an hour, but it's always shorter bursts. So even in a meeting, you will see me actually go on and off, right? I'll focus for a bit, then I'll go off. Then I'll come back again, I'll go off. So it'll just keep happening that way. And as a culture that's kind of building up in PolicyBazaar, in fact, one of the things that's happened because of that is one is able to kind of spot a small piece in a haystack, right? A nail in a haystack, or whatever you want to call it. You're able to kind of pinpoint very quickly because you get work in very sharp, focused efforts. And the third part is, as I spoke about nutrition, etc., all those pieces, all this fitness, exercise, etc., it all feeds into the work. I think we are not our work will only be as good as our body permits, as our families permit, as our minds permit. And so everything has to fall in place. And so this whole holistic thinking also applies in business, because if if some parts of our life are not working, it will obviously have an impact on our business in the medium to long term. So I think those are the kind of things one can apply here.
So Yashish, I'll start picking up audience questions and comments. So Deepak, it's more of a comment he's making that, that you're an awesome person, seem very down to earth. I think people really appreciate your commentary about valuing the team, and I'm pleasantly surprised about your comment about how you shared equity and how a lot of those people have stuck by you, which is a great feat, for all these years. I'll get to a question by Sandeep. It's really about, when things are tough, right? And you almost think of giving up. I saw some commentary also that in 2011, when the insurance regulator had changed its policy for online policy aggregators, it had you rethink your business model. So how did you cope with the stress around that situation? And also, I think you came out of it really well, but there are situations when, I think you almost have to say that, I've given it my best shot and I need to just move on. And how do you make that distinction? That do I continue to stick on to what I have and, continue to go at it? Because you will find entrepreneurs, that will maybe stick on to a business model that they really believe in, but nobody else believes in. And they keep going at it and they never see the light at the end of the tunnel. So how do you make that distinction? And in your case, how did you make that distinction?
So Badu, I've been through failures and I've been through very stressful situations, and I've been through successful situations also, all three. And I'll try to give you some examples of all three. Success is easy. So when it comes, the only thing I try to do, I'll give you an example. So our health insurance business grew 160% year on year in June or July. And our team was very happy about it, right? The 160% growth. And I was also happy about it. Who wouldn't be happy with 160% growth? But the only thing, every review I was doing was telling them that, guys, you are enjoying the ride. This is not because of you. And that's a very harsh message to give to the management team, and they're like family, right? And it's not a message I want to give, but it's a very important message for them to get, because that was true. If they had tried harder, they could have gone to 200, because it's in the successful times that you actually try the least. Because you're being pushed by the wave. It's usually when you have the wind behind you that you try the least. But the best cyclists also pick up at that time. I have noticed sometimes there are cyclists who take a lead of 100 meters in the downhill, because that is when they say everybody's relaxing and this is when I'm going to really push forward, right? And in fact, one of our business units was having a very tough time at that time. And I said, look, so I think success is a time when you must work hard, very, very hard to get ahead, because everybody is going to be relaxing during the successful time, right? Second, stressful times. I, first of all, acknowledge them. So I remember, when the regulations changed and all, I went to my co-founder and I said, these were my exact words. I still remember, कि यार ये तो ulcer करा के छोड़ेंगे, मार के छोड़ेंगे ये तो. Because, I could feel it in my stomach, right? You could feel the ulcers in your stomach. I have even been to the regulator many times and said, कि sir, मर जाएंगे sir हम तो ऐसे. अगर आप ऐसे करते रहोगे तो, क्योंकि that's, and I don't mean it to, I mean it genuinely. But it's good to acknowledge कि यार मेरे को stress हो रहा है इस चीज से. Right? I'm getting stressed because of this. And then to laugh about it, because you can't do much else about it. Like, I'm not an expert, right? I'm not an expert at meditation or anything. But what we would do is we'd just laugh about it. We'd laugh really hard about it. As they say, जब काफी लग जाएगा हंसी आने लग जाती है. In fact, my kids have the same thing. So one day we were doing the plank and we compete with each other. They're also very fit. They're both national level athletes and all that stuff. So they're both very fit. So we were doing the plank and, it had been multiple minutes and all that stuff. And then I started laughing. And the, and my daughter said, this is the most dangerous phase because once he starts laughing, he's going to stop feeling the pain and he's going to keep going. So I think it's very important to laugh a lot because stress to aayega yaar. What can you do in business, right? Stress will be there. I think, and you'll get some terrible stress at times. Mostly from stress comes from uncontrollable quarters. And, clearly one uncontrollable quarter for us is the regulation and all that, right? And, it'll just come. And it may make sense, it may not make sense, but it will be there. I think the third, give up. I'm looking back at the times I've given up. It's always been because of a disconnect, a people disconnect. It's never ever been because an idea was good or bad. No idea is good or bad, I think. And I can be wrong here. I can be totally wrong, but this is I can only tell you what my experiences have been over the last, 20, 30 years, which is okay, which is a decent amount of time. And if I look at my failures, I failed at First Europa. We failed in Doc Prime. You could call those failures. You can call them early learning. You can call them whatever. But the reality is there was a disconnect. There is no reason why First Europa could not have become 10 times bigger than PolicyBazaar. If our disconnect wasn't there. Disconnect can be on values, it can be on thought process, it can be on anything. Every business has to have, so for example, in Doc Prime, I could never, there was a level of comfort with spend versus revenue. I am not worried about the actual spend versus revenue that we can handle. That we also have, for example, in some of our other businesses. But it is when a comfort sets in that this is okay. So-and-so is doing it, so it's okay. See, that becomes something that becomes untenable then. Because just because, every company has different values. And because a Facebook or an Amazon or a Paytm or somebody can do it, doesn't mean we can do it. Or because 1mg can, I don't know, right? My point is, if there is disconnect, failures happen. And I think effort should be put in making sure that those disconnects don't happen. If I look at even First Europa, it was the same. We had a French business who wanted to spend a lot and we wanted to curtail, and he thought we were curtailing him and he wanted to, and eventually it became a situation where we just couldn't handle that dinosaur or whatever. And maybe I was the dinosaur, I don't know. Right? Who's to say who is right or wrong? But if you have a vision level disconnect, a comfort level disconnect, a strategy level disconnect, then you cannot succeed. And my failures there would be inability to sit down. And I tried quite hard, quite honestly. But sometimes it's an inability to sit down and reach consensus. And thus you keep, even in Pesa, like I'm quite open about these things, right? Even in PolicyBazaar, for example, I have a discomfort with the amount of senior management, right? It's our own company, but I have a discomfort. And I think the only reason it could ever fail could be that discomfort. There'll be no other reason. Otherwise, it's a brilliant execution team. And I think, yeah, that's it. That's all I would say. I think somewhere we need to address our discomforts as early as they start appearing. And I think after that, if you start steering things very quickly, then why would you not succeed? You're working hard, you're doing the right things. One idea may not work, another idea may work. You'll try through different ways, right? Like Doc Prime is telemedicine. You're telling me telemedicine can't work in India? It has to work. But yeah.
So listen, I'm going to move to an exciting segment of our chat now. I call it the rapid fire. So, just fire away quick answers to these. An addiction apart from fitness that you enjoy?
It's like family, friends, trekking,
Yeah. A,
outdoors.
a habit that annoys you and you want to get rid of?
I still eat comfort food many times.
Don't get rid of that. And one morning habit that you cannot compromise with? I can guess this.
I, I first of all, I get up very early, and I like to exercise, but I do compromise. Like I'm in the UK right now, and for the last 6 months, I've been compromising. I don't exercise in the morning. I start work at 5 o'clock because in India it's 9:30, uh, and I do my exercise at 3 o'clock. So yes, I have been able to compromise, but ideally, I would like to get my morning hours. It's not a very comfortable thing for me. I would like to get my exercise out of the way in the morning, but of course, I can't live in the UK and then I'll get up in the midnight here.
Your favorite entrepreneur?
I like Sanjeev Bikhchandani quite a bit. I also, yeah, I think Sanjeev Bikhchandani would be there.
Favorite athlete?
I've been reading a lot about Arnold Schwarzenegger, which is not my field, but I've been reading a lot about him and the way he's focused on what he wanted to achieve and how he never took no for an answer. Yeah, I'm sure there are many others, but that's the person I'm reading about most recently.
So I want to also ask you some things about startups, and I'm sure
Yeah,
you're very well tuned. One of the most overrated skills in startups,
I think idea,
and conversely, the most underrated skill.
execution. You know, I talk to venture capitalists and they tell me, how will you win? And I tell them execution. And they struggle with that. But the point is, we were not the first starter. We were about the 15th player in our market. And, you know, they keep asking me, why will competition not come? And, you know, all those kind of stuff. And they want some theoretical answer. But the answer actually lies in every day getting up in the morning and doing your work. I'm not saying others don't do it, but we certainly do it.
So, Yashish, when I look at sort of your graph, right? You went to all the top institutes, IIT, IIM, then NCR. You started your career with Bain and then eBookers, and now, built a great business. So, what's sort of next? And what do you want your legacy to be?
There's no such plan. I've never really planned uh, life that far. You know, you take every day as it comes. Uh, I hadn't planned to be in IIT till 1 year before the IIT entrance exam. In fact, this is going to shock you, Bhanu. In class 11, I did not know what IIT is. Now that is going to shock you. And I even remember the name of the person who told me what IIT is. His name is Siddharth Gupta. He is still there, and somebody can connect with him. He's a great friend of mine in St. Columbus. He came up to me and he said, you know, you should try for IIT. And I said, why do you say that? Like, no, sorry, what is IIT? And then he explained that there's something called the Indian Institute of Technology, which, you know, if you're good in maths and all, you should go there. And I said, okay, then I'll try for it. But all I'm trying to say is that's how I am. Yeah. My family and my good friends call me Obelix for a reason. I, probably fell into a, pot of magic potion when I was a baby. Yeah. So, some crazy stuff keeps happening and I don't even know that I can do stuff and I just end up doing it.
So I know there is the fitness passion around Ironman and there is PolicyBazaar. But, given how every few years it feels like you have a new goal, Abhi, is there a new goal brewing in your mind?
Yeah, there is. There will be a time to talk about it. There is.
Okay.
See, I'll tell you what it is. what we are doing at PolicyBazaar is phenomenal work, which people from the outside cannot see. They just can't see it because they think of PolicyBazaar just as a dump pipe. A dump pipe is customers come, we connect them to insurers, they buy. But there's a huge data layer and a tech layer being built in the middle, which is because you're interacting with the customer, right? So you're picking up a lot of data about the consumer. And there's the huge pipe pieces being built, and the pipes are getting intelligent, they're getting smart. Now, what I'm finding is there is nothing in the regulation about the smartness of these pipes. The regulation only talks about the pipes. The regulation is only interested in, are you a distributor, are you an insurer? It doesn't get into what all the pipes can do in the middle, what all information a distributor can pick up, what all information an insurer can use, etc., etc. And this is a global phenomena. I think it's a great opportunity to take this smartness in those pipes, create it as a separate company, and float it globally, and make it available to PolicyBazaar and make it available to everybody like PolicyBazaar. So right, and to all the insurance companies and everything, and be totally unregulated. Because you don't have to be regulated. It is exactly like, if I was to think about it, Amazon is not a dumb pipe, right? There's a lot of smarts in it. If Amazon, instead of, could just give all that smartness to any retailer in the market, you take it and you just use it. And yeah, you give me 0.1% of whatever you make because you gain, or you give me a share of what you gain through these smartness, right? Exclusive product creation, etc. And I think that's a phenomenal idea whose time in the insurance industry has come. And it's a global idea. It's not about India. It's on a global scale. So executing it will require a very, very special knowledge of what needs to be done. So it's something I'm passionate about. Whether I'll do it, whether PolicyBazaar will do it, we'll see.
Is it about using the smartness to custom create insurance products that don't exist?
That is part of it. But it's about using smartness at a global level to customize products with insurers, give a lot of intelligence to insurers, give a lot of intelligence to distributors, and give a lot of comfort to consumers that their transactions are going to be managed well, right? Whereas insurers focus more on the capital part of it and the risk-taking part of it, whereas distributors focus more on the front-end customer brand building, etc.
So, I want to ask you this. I was speaking to a leadership coach and he told me, if you can't do 100 push-ups, you can't be the CEO. So I'm just wondering, I'm sure given the fact that you're such a fitness freak yourself, is this now become a criteria for you when you hire people?
No. Fitness is certainly not a criteria. I encourage it. And I like it. But sometimes, it's very, very strange, Bhanu. Once I had a CV with a guy claiming that he was a state level swimmer. So I asked him, so what event did you do? So he said, I used to do the 200 meters. So I said, and what was your timing? And he said, I think 36 seconds. Now, 200 meters will take you 2 minutes, 20 seconds or so if you are a state level swimmer. My point is, fitness is a state of mind. It's not about what you've achieved. And I think we still hired that guy. I kept laughing at him for the next 2 years because every time I'd meet him, I would say, "Haan, bhai, state level swimmer, batao." 36 seconds में तुमने 200 मीटर कैसे कर लिया? 50 मीटर मुश्किल से होते हैं. So my point is, no, we certainly don't. I like people who are fit, but I also think it's a personal choice at the end of it. Many people in our company don't like it. And I'll give you some examples. There is a guy called Neeraj in our company. And he's certainly not a fit guy by any standards. But we were playing a basketball match once, very, very early, just when we had started. And what I saw, this guy did not let the basket go through, man. Like he just wouldn't let the guy go through. He would fall, he would break his knees, he would do anything. And that one characteristic I picked up, that this guy he doesn't have the ability, but he will give everything to not let, I'll give you one more example. People who I'm very impressed by. I met this gentleman, Arun, he's Colonel Arun Malik. And we were doing the Airtel half marathon, right? And he's 1 or 2 years elder to me. And while we were doing the Airtel half marathon, uh, I was not able to keep up with him. And this guy slowed down just a little bit to make sure I could keep up with him. He never mentioned it. You know, about 2, 3 days after the thing, I went to him and I said, would you please like to join PolicyBazaar as chief operating officer or anything? He refused. But if I see value like that, I would love to have such people. So all I'm saying is I don't need to have specialists in a particular field. I need those values where people can do something for somebody, where people can give everything even if they don't have the ability, right? Those values are what I look for. And those values don't come on a CV. You feel them, right?
So I'm curious. Okay, you don't look for them, look for fitness being a criteria, but I'm just wondering, have you been able to? I mean, there's such great learnings from your sort of fitness regime. I'm just wondering, have you sort of initiated some sort of formalized?
Oh yeah, we do have a fitness coach who comes in, multiple times. Used to come in at least before COVID, multiple times a week to train people. We have a gym. We have a pretty good gym for the size of company that we are. Everybody is welcome there. We encourage people all the time, and a lot of people do fitness. We have a very good cricket team. One of the best in the country. Again, for a company our size, that's quite an achievement. So yeah, we do our bit. We do have annual sports meet. Not many companies have that, right? Just an annual sports meet. Where you don't just play cricket, but you have cricket, badminton, tennis, table tennis. You have football. You also have running, those kind of things. So yeah, we do our bit. But all I'm saying is I look for values. Those values can be in both fit and non-fit people. As I give the examples of Arun, who's super fit, and Neeraj, who certainly isn't fit. But
so, I think this is an important question because a lot of the attendees are aspiring entrepreneurs, and I get this myself a lot. It's around funding in these times, and also finding co-founders. So people who are sort of starting out now, early stage, any tips you have for them in terms of how to approach funding? And the other big question is, how do I get a co-founder? How do I find them? I mean, I think one of the things that you mentioned is look within your own personal networks of people you have worked with. Are there any additional tips you can give them?
sure. So the first thing is, I know it's a lot of people would have said it, but increasingly, there's a lot of respect for businesses that are able to build something without a lot of capital. A lot of respect for those businesses. See, you would get very excited by the stories of a Mukesh Bansal or a Kunal Shah, or even if I was to leave PolicyBazaar today and start another company, maybe I could raise a lot of capital, or a Sachin who has a lot of capital. You may or may not have the experience to be taken at face value for that larger funding, right? My view is today I'm seeing, especially in the whole euphoria has gone about just the idea. People want to see a level of execution, and there is a lot of respect for execution. I have seen some companies recently which have done execution and built a little amount, and then their value comes in very fast. Then after that, so I'm seeing companies whom investors are chasing. I will not name them because that may not be right, but I'm seeing companies out there that investors are chasing at a very early stage. And investors chasing, and then 10 investors want to get in. And investors ask me to do, because we have a lot of investors, they may ask me to do a reference call just to kind of explain how good an investor they are. And some of them are very good investors. What I'm saying is there are companies that are being chased by investors. So become that. If you are chasing investment, it's going to be tough. That's just the reality. That's just the reality. And the common theme I have seen across all these who have been chased by investors are they have built some traction without the need for capital. Whether they've used a B2B medium, done some push work, and they are usually very small teams, very small. So they're not like large teams. They're like, many times the question is, yeah, what do we do? This is the only guy running the business. And so that becomes a bit of a, okay, so yeah, okay, with capital, they'll build that, right? That is an easier problem to solve than to have a big team with no revenue and a big idea needing a lot of capital. That is, increasingly bound to be a disaster, or more likely to be a disaster, right? I think in terms of co-founders, see, it'll be good to have one co-founder who understands technology quite well. If you can have a third co-founder who understands law and legal a bit and compliance, that's fine, but that can also come later. But if you're in a tech business, having one co-founder with deep understanding of tech will be very helpful, because that will help you into the future as you keep scaling your vision. So usually you should have one holder of vision, one holder of tech. That works quite well. If you're a tech person, it'll be good to get a visionary co-founder, right? You could also get a co-founder from a fund, because that's another very interesting thing I have seen these days, that somebody works in a small fund, whether it's a SEF or SEF is not a small fund, they're a large fund, but I'm saying Matrix, SEF, all these funds. If one of those people can join you, because then they probably have a network of people who, can credibly invest with you. Because I know you will need that capital. Like, one of the reasons PolicyBazaar are successful, we may have everything else, but eventually InfoEdge supported us. And InfoEdge supported us not because, I'm sure they say we were a great idea, but Sanjeev and Hitesh have known me for some time, right? So I think the relationship-based investment still exists. I would also be very worried to invest in somebody I did not know at all, right? So I think that relationship can smoothen the investment. So if you could get one of the co-founders as being somebody from one of these funds, they could really help you. Or somebody who's got a relationship with a large organization. And I think the first investor you got to value. Even today, I will never do anything that InfoEdge does not want, right? So I think you've got to value, because without them, there's no business, and that value has to stay.
Great, Yashish. So thank you. I think we've come to the end of the hour. I know you're a busy guy, and you're taking the time out to have this chat. I'm hoping our audience found it very, very insightful. And look, all the best with PolicyBazaar. I'm hoping to see the next generation of products coming out of PolicyBazaar. As you mentioned, you're looking to capitalize on the smartness that you see on your platform. And continue to stay insanely awesome and keep inspiring us, with your fitness goals as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhanu. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me over. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Yashish. Okay. Thank you, everyone.